Smart 24, driving business.
Well, good morning and many thanks for being part of the show this morning. It is the budget month, and like I did mention earlier, is that when you look at the fact that in the next 1 week, we shall already have known what is in the budget because it will be presented come next week. So as we prepare you, as we usher you into this particular budget month that we've already kicked off in the month of June, you get to realize that tomorrow President Museveni will be addressing the nation on the state of the nation address. That is where he normally breaks down for us to understand how the state of the economy is, the social aspects of it as well. But besides that, our conversations relating to the national budget continue, and of course we are getting to understand more of this program-based budget for the next financial year 2023-2024. The current financial year that is coming to an end, June 30th, is one that was having a 47.2 trillion budget, and besides that we have 52.7 trillion budget for the next financial year. Now the twist of things here is pretty much looking at the fact that we have a financial year that has not been overstretched as we expected at the start of this calendar year, but now when you come to think of it, the government has been doing some kind of revisions in regards to why we have the current budget at 52.7 trillion as we're getting into the 2023-2024 financial year. Well, the previous budget was at 47.5 trillion, approximately 48 trillion Ugandan shillings. But now joining me to discuss more of this particular one as we look deeper into the national budget here in Uganda, I have Odaka Asuman, who's the Secretary General, National Economic Empowerment Dialogue, that is Need Uganda. And of course, we have more discussions on how best the national budget is going to be helpful to the Ugandans. Good morning, sir. Many thanks for joining us.
Yeah, good morning, my brother. And I want to thank you for the kind invitation. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure is ours to host you. And of course, I hope you are well and hope the people at Need as well doing awesome.
Well, by the grace of God, we're okay.
Okay.
And Need is fine.
Oh.
When people ask about Need, I keep telling them Need is a political party. We officially registered or opened the doors on the 3rd of October 2022.
Okay.
So we are less than 1 year. And we are centered around, our orientation is about economic empowerment and conversations about things that matter for this country. That is really about me.
Okay. Well, and besides that, as we continue to have our conversations here, there's always been a very huge question in regards to the national budget. Well, governments all over start their financial year at, in the middle of the year. That is 1st July. The question is, why is it so? Because, normally the year starts on 1st January, unlike the Ethiopian calendar and a few other countries, and that follow a different kind of calendar or that follow stars and everything. But when you come to, think about the financial year in terms of the economic world, why do we always have the financial year starting from 1st July?
It is not that all countries start their financial years on 1st July.
Okay.
There are actually some countries like these European countries, Scandinavian countries, actually begin their financial year or end their financial year with the calendar year.
Okay.
Why most of the countries that you are accustomed to begin their financial year in actually 1st July, because
especially
of the
East Africa.
especially the most Commonwealth countries begin their year
in the middle of,
and that was because of Britain, their colonial masters.
That set the pace.
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, all countries that were colonized by Britain I don't know any that has changed its budgeting year. All of them have followed the Commonwealth budgeting system. France has also Francophone countries have also followed the same budgeting system. So it is countries actually followed the budgeting system of their colonialists. That is really, there is no rocket science. And the reason behind it is that the Commonwealth countries, especially because most of them are Christian countries, okay, when the calendar year ends with a lot of festivities, and that's really the reason. It is not. There is no economic reason. The reason is really social.
Okay, but
and colonial or historical, if you want to call them.
Okay, and of course now it brings me back to the fact that we have a national budget awaiting.
Yes.
Besides that, the financial year for Uganda is coming to an end.
Yes.
How has our budget performed? This financial year, has it reached the expectations? If you were to take us back,
certainly, very, very doubtful, very, very debatable.
Okay.
Very extremely debatable, because if you want to know, and that is part of my problem with especially the budget committee and also Parliament as an entity, maybe it is also a legal thing, because you cannot begin a new budget year without auditing the performance of the previous budget. That would have actually been part of rules of procedure of Parliament, but also within the budget committee, to mandate the budget committee that before you appropriate the new, there should be some audit on the old, because how the old performed should determine how you allocate for the new, because they tell us that their budgeting system is incremental. We have an incremental budgeting system. Incremental in a way that if the previous time area A had maybe 10 boreholes, okay, this year that same area A we shall budget for 15. But unfortunately, we simply increase the 15 boreholes. I am giving borehole just an example, without going back to audit whether the 15 were sunk properly, or were actually sunk, or they are not there on, or it was eaten. For us, in the budget framework paper, we simply indicate we have increased. And yet, all of us, even at micro level, at domestic level, when you are used to buying 10 kilograms of sugar, and you know that will take me 1 month, it is reasonable, it will therefore come automatically in your mind that before I buy another kilo of sugar, I will find out if in the store the other bag of sugar is over or not, how it was used. Was it used properly? How come this time there was some shortage? How come this time it has stretched? That is auditing. Therefore, in macro level, and especially in regard to budgeting, it would be part of our rules of procedure of Parliament, especially the budget committee, to first audit the performance of the previous Parliament, the previous budget. Now, in regard to your specific question, did it perform? Number one, the performance of any macro parameter in economic sense also reflects at the macro level. Now, number one, if the budget performed, you would therefore say that touch your pocket and see. In the last year, how was your budget? How was your consumption pattern? How was your demand pattern? Now, if it is shrunk, therefore, because the summation of all our economic, our demand and so on, sums up and comes to what we call the macro or at national level. Now, if the farmers are crying about, because if you look at the last budget year, the seasons, in terms of season, because when you can't talk about the economy of this country without talking about seasons, because we still think that agriculture is our backbone. And we heavily rely on nature in regard to the agriculture. Very few people in this country now rely on modern way of farming. So the farming, you'll know that production went down. And if production went down, therefore, at the market, there was nothing. You know right now, if you go to the market and you're looking for banana, a smallest batch of banana, you know how much it costs. But people's real demand also went down. The real demand, purchasing power. There was no money. We all know. You see, when you go to schools now, this is the third week or second week, depending on whether private or public school. But you'll see, I have a colleague I was talking to this morning who owns a school, and he's telling me less than 20% of his students are back. And now he's trying to call parents, and he's now the one finding out from parents. Is the child coming back? And yet the previous term, 50% did not complete fees. Now, that is a measure of the economic stand of individuals, because that is a necessity. Education is now a necessity. Now, you will know a Ugandan behavior in regard to economic behavior, in regard to how he spends on education. That is an indicator. How he spends on food. You will know that there are so many families that went last in the budget year we are concluding. I am telling you, those that were eating 4 meals reduced. I am telling you, that is an indicator. But look at businesses. Go downtown and see businesses that have closed. When you go to Kikubo, you will know businesses. If you were shopping from a particular person in Kikubo last year, I am telling you, you will go to Kikubo, you will find either somebody different there, or the place is closed. That is how that's in the common man's way of seeing it. That indicates and gives you a snapshot of how this economy performed. Now, come to the issue of salaries and what and so on. You know that in this, after COVID, this entire year, you know, the grappling, the arguments, the talk, the quarrel, and so on about how our salaries are not performing, are not enough, and so you see how many people are killing each other. I mean themselves, including themselves, on account that what they have is now that is now inflation. Now inflation has an indication on the poor performance
of the budget.
of the economy. Now, of course, the economy is summarily the budget. Now, look at our export-import. You know that in this budget year, our balance of trade was performing extremely badly. No? If you look at the kind of things we've been exporting, of course, there are other things that because of our own bad manners in terms of some of our key players, they have also been. So the thing is so terrible. If you look at URA level, URA was given a target to collect 25 trillion. For this financial year. For up to yesterday when I checked, they had only a money to collect 17 trillion. Now, a shortfall of about 7 or 8 trillion. Now, when URA, our sole revenue collecting body, cannot afford to get, after squeezing every small business, sometimes even taxing people double. And they say it's a mistake. I don't want to blame them. Systems make mistakes. But I'm saying there is evidence that there are people who have been taxed double. There are people introducing every manner of tax. Taxing businesses taxing people even out of business, but still you can't afford to raise 25 trillion. That shows you that the economy did very badly. Yes.
Okay. And, well, of course, getting back, you did mention something to do with the inflation.
Yes.
And, by the look of things, some of the other experts do believe that with the inflation factors at times do relate to the global crisis, besides the COVID-19 setbacks, and also there's some disruptions in the supply chain due to the Ukraine and Russia crisis that has actually gone into second year of the same. You know, when you look at this, is this too much to blame on the national budget?
Yes, yes. You see, let me tell you, everything begins and ends with the policy makers.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, there could be international economic disruptions. For example, the unforeseen, for example, maybe COVID, you get it? I don't want to blame our poor performance of the economic poor performance on Ukraine and Russia, because I have struggled to find one thing we can only get from Ukraine and Russia, and we cannot get it anywhere else in Uganda, and I've failed. That there is no single thing. If it is wheat, what is it? What is it that we can get only there and we can't get here? So it also it speaks to our poor planning. For example, if you talk about wheat, you know the climate and the soils of Uganda. When you go to the Sebei area, you know, wheat performs extremely well there. So let me tell you, the war in Russia has now taken us coming to 2 years. Now, it only talks about planning. That there were countries in this world that just closed, not even because of the war and so on, intentionally disrupted their value and supply chain, so that they plan within, you know what they call it? They plan. They close their economy, planned, and today they are what we are referring to as the Asian tigers and so on and so forth. Now, for us, that was voluntary. Now, this is involuntary. Now, in involuntary, under involuntary circumstances, people are supposed to plan better.
Okay.
So no one should ever blame our economic failures on the war in Russia. That is a big excuse, and it is an acceptable excuse on the side of policymakers especially.
Okay, now when you look at the next financial year that we are actually heading into as a 52.7 trillion budget, and that is what was passed by Parliament. But there is also another issue here in regards to the fact that in this next financial year budget, there are budget cuts. Budget cuts are in relation to cutting expenditures and expenses. There are lots of things that the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development feels should no longer be considered as a priority, or should not be considered amongst things to be bought or to be, where the government should put their emphasis on. And amongst that includes buying of vehicles. There are lots of other budget cuts that have been indicated in here. Was that a good move?
It is ideally supposed to be a good move.
Okay.
Let me tell you, do you know that in our last budget, the budget we are concluding, 73% of that money was supposed to be consumption. 73%
of the budget.
Of the budget is consumption. Actually, this one should be a little higher. I have not made a calculation on this one. And therefore, our administrative and consumption cost burden consumption and administrative burden on the budget is so huge. So reasonably, we should actually be looking at areas of cuts. Now prioritization is important in budgeting. Now, and when you look at prioritization, it would be this duplication. And they rightly pointed out, and that's my problem with our policymakers, is that they point out the correct thing and do the wrong thing.
Okay.
They deliberately point out correct thing. For example, when they talked about merging these MDAs, you find you have Ministry of Works, you have UNRWA, you have Road Fund, you have so many. You see? Now, all those ones you have, for example, one of the things that are battering business people and businesses out of business is the cost of electricity. Do you know in the world, Uganda Ugandans pay the highest cost of electricity. Only the highest in the world is Turkey. Okay. Then the second one is Uganda. Do you know the only reason for Uganda is because of duplication. You know what we used to have as one entity are now 7, and each of these ones has staff. Now, staffs that need huge cars, huge other things, huge offices, huge rent, and so on. So, I think the budget cuts would have been good because they will reduce on the administrative cost, the salaries, and so on. Unfortunately, if you look at this budget, because the areas they mentioned for cuts were those buying of cars, workshops, trips out, workshops, and so on. But when you look at the detail of this budget, all of them are actually there. So there is nothing that has been, it was actually suggested in speech, but in the budget, all those things are there.
Okay. And well, of course.
So they lied, in other words.
And well, of course, like he did mention that we are looking at some of these particular, the budget does ideally look to be, the budget cuts would ideally work, like he has mentioned. But of course, there are some of the other shortfalls that need to be addressed as a key consideration for the national budget to come to pass. But anyways, after the break, when we return, we're going to be looking at this, the priorities for the next financial year budget and see if our cards are right in regards to the priorities that we have set forward. But before that, as we're heading into the break, remember to invest and grow your investments with the Zabo platform using the USSD code *292#. And you kickstart off your investment journey with Zabo. Zabo is a platform by Altex East Africa which says do something new. Now, which something new can you do today? Choose Zabo and kickstart off your investment with the same. Zabo, my money, my future. And Altex East Africa says do something new. Well, all you need to do is to register with your national identification number and kickstart off your investment with the Zabo platform. Zabo, my money, my future. After the break, we return by looking at some of the particular priorities for the next financial year budget and also trying to understand how the program-based budgeting approach will be followed and pretty much to see its applicable strategies and how best you can understand it as a viewer wherever you are. You're still watching SMB.
Say goodbye to paperwork and travel costs. Now every MTN customer can register to invest in securities anytime and anywhere with Zabo in a few simple steps. Step 1. Dial *292#. Step 2. Select option 1. Register with Zabo. Step 3. Enter your full names. Step 4. Enter your national identification number. Step 5. Enter your national identification card number. In 24 hours, you will receive an SMS confirming your registration. Congratulations, you are now ready to invest.
MTN Uganda presents Saka Freeballs, King of the East, also recognized by the Kabaka of Uganda. Palazzo in Laves on the 9th of June at the Cricket Oval. 20k ordinary, 50k VIP. Tables go for 3 million shillings. For discounted tickets, use the MTN mobile money by dialing *165*98#. For 15k ordinary and 45k VIP. On Saturday the 10th of June, Mbara Ajip Motel. Sunday 11th of June, Fort Portal Grounds. Friday 16th of June, Luwero Grounds. Saturday 17th of June, Ginger Trans Garden. Sunday 18th of June, Mubende Stadium. Organized by Savavulu Badam. Come and witness the best concert of a new generation. Miss at your own risk. Sponsored by Pepsi Cola, Century Property Royal Estate, Mango Safari, Protea Hotel, Reveiw, and MTN.
Smart 24, driving business.
Here we go again. It's 9:30. We're into our last part of the conversation, still looking at the next financial year budget and, of course, looking at the approach of the program-based budget. Well, tomorrow will be the State of the Nation address. That and more is what we shall be discussing, by the way, our next level of programming here on Smart 24 television. But besides that, the national budget is what we are looking at deeply and trying to understand as we prepare you for that day of presenting the national budget come the 14th. But also, when you come to think of it, I don't know whether you as a Ugandan follow up on these particular budget allocations, and if you know how you are affected in the long run in regards to how our policymakers put out these budget allocations. But besides that, I'm still with Odaka Ashman, who's the Secretary General at the National Economic Empowerment Dialogue. That's Need Uganda, as we digest and analyze more of the national budget of 2023-2024. Well, as we continue to look at the national budget here, let's look at our priorities as a country. Are our priorities right? Are they the rightful priorities that we need? And if at all they are we putting in more efforts to ensure that, well, these priorities are indeed well funded?
You see, many countries, or developed countries, or even ours, or analysts, when they want to know the mentality of the policymakers in town, in that country, they look at the allocation, how you allocate your budget. The current president of the US is the one that said, don't tell me your values, show me your budget. I will see the expenditure and I will tell you what you value.
Okay.
Yes. When you look at our budget, you will see that the priority goes to, say, security. Priority is going to supposedly health, and so on and so forth. But let's try going into detail. Security, I am one of those that have been supporting government because security cuts across, because you can't do farming when gun and bullets are flying. Children will not go to school when there is war. Exactly. So security should be priority. But you see, priority for how many years? That's number one. Number two, must the prioritization of security crowd out other areas? Because then, if you overemphasize it, you will think that it has a trickle down or a multiplier effect, which is not true. And therefore, if you are prioritizing security, sensibly, you're supposed to prioritize it alongside a certain highly productive sector, which compensates, which would be in position to compensate the other sector of security, because for it is only it doesn't have an immediate trickle down or multiplier effect. That is how people budget, especially those who have orientation of security. They would therefore do that. If you look at our own security, our own prioritization needs budget, you will see that, first of all, even when they talk about the health, we have had a number of times health, infrastructure, and education being put. There was 2009, 2018, around 2019, 2018, 2017. There were those years that infrastructure took leading priority areas. But when you get back and audit what therefore happened, and that becomes the disappointing phase of it, of the analysis, that you budget and you prioritize health, but when people go to those health centers, it is not there. Let me tell you, I come from Tororo. I am a national leader, but let me give Tororo. Baganda, the ones who say, Omutoja amanyi nkuba jetera okutonyi. In Tororo Hospital, for example, there were years we spent without, up to now, we do not have a fridge that preserves dead bodies. It is a regional referral hospital servicing 8 districts. 8 districts. There was a time, it is painful, but let me say it. There was a time we didn't have power. Tororo Hospital did not have power. Really, when health had the big chunk of the budget, we didn't have power. A mother came to give birth. Unfortunately, he got there and there was no power. Midwives were using candles before they ran. She was really, whatever she gave birth, dogs came and ate her baby. It is painful, whatever. But you see, when you look at all those, you look at health. Now, they went into, they told us, the policy, those makers told us that that budget was to put health center force in every constituency.
Okay.
How many constituencies have health center force? And that money was put in the budget. Even those where they constructed those health center force, they constructed a building, but no hospital, no medicine. You go to referral hospital. Do you know that all health center force in this country, for the last 6, 7, 4, 5 months, enough in whatever of that, they have not had supply. Supply of medicine is not there. I am talking about now. Yet in the previous whatever, we had health, a lot of good money in terms of health, but we've also been having a lot of supplementaries. Uganda Medical Store is tight-lipped. Everybody is tight-lipped about the supply for medicine. So, and yet health, in economic terms, they say health is wealth. Now, if you don't have a health population, you will not have a productive population to service your economy. These things have, have a connection. 2, security. We've been having, one of the things that I have been, people have been talking about in regard to our people in town, government, is about security. You know, security has, your security either, of course now let's talk about gun security. We must differentiate between defense and security. Defense we've done very well because defense involves action of a potential or a real threat. But security, when you look at, maybe when we did defense very well, we then became careless with the small arms in the hands of people. Now, these small arms in the hands of people have become the biggest threat to our own economy. Let me tell you, you know that people are now closing their businesses early. They can't do businesses early. There are certain because they fear gunmen. Investors are now moving out of this economy because of arms in the hands of people. Let me tell you, you had one of our good traffic police commander who said that nowadays you stop a vehicle, the first thing somebody lowers the windscreen, and when you peep inside, you will only see guns. Now, that is not good for our investors, our investment climate. Because first of all, the president and all our people go out there conversing and convincing foreign investors to come here. Foreigners, this is not their home. The only benefit they want from here is making profit and therefore proper environment to do their business. Now, if we can't afford to give them that in regard to security, then we are the loser. You see, the other would be the other prioritization that I had thought it was going to be done in the other budget was trying to regionalize economic activities. Let me tell you, God created this country so well that He regionalized it, even in terms of economy itself. When you go to Toro, I don't know whether you've been to Toro, that belt grows a lot of coffee, but also tea. Okay. Dry tea leaves there, a kilo in Toro, is about 1,700 in total now. The same, without any value addition, in Mombasa is at it is at 4,800 Ugandan shillings. Now, as policy makers, the only thing we'd be doing is to try to have the Mombasa price, have it sold either here or even a half of it. Just imagine a Toro farmer of tea leaves. If you put, because that means that your budget would not be to either spoon feed this farmer. Your budget should be focusing on creating a conducive environment where this Toro farmer of tea can be able to sell his tea leaves at a favorable price, and therefore there will be a trickle down and splash on in the economy. That's as simple as that. When you go to Buganda, when you go to Sebeya, I told you about Sebeya, it is the time when we have shortage of wheat because of the so-called war. But you see, the only thing when you go to Sebeya, it is land wrangles and land grabbing. No economic activity. The land is vast, the land is fertile, but the land is empty and people are running around shooting each other. Cattle rustling the other side, some fights with the Bagisu this side, some other non-Bagisu, non-Sabin are also in the land, grabbing the land, and we are into that mix. Now, that is a policy issue that we need to address. We should know that it affects, because just imagine because that place has a capacity of producing close to 1 million tons of wheat every season. That place. But there is no wheat there. Imagine you empowered the people you created an environment where the people of Sebeya can afford to whatever, even just 500,000 tons every season. What economic empowerment would you have given them? Of course, and the rest, when you go to West Nile, there is tobacco, the issue of tobacco. The policy environment became so hostile that even BAT decided to close here. How would you do that to you? And that also speaks to the performance. Because how can BAT, one of the biggest taxpayers in your economy, how can you allow it to collapse?
Okay. Now, well, when
that's a policy failure.
Okay. Well, besides the policy, when you look at the next financial year, it is a program-based budget.
Yes.
Application of this budget.
Yes.
How are we going to get used to it? Because first of all, when you look at some of the members of parliament who are supposed to push for the issue to do with the constituents, understanding this budget, also have less information about this structured format of the budget. How is it going to be applicable?
Of course, that is the problem. One time I was telling people at our office that when we look at the policy issues of this country, because one of my people said, you see, you people, Uganda has the best policies. I told them, man, policies, the goodness of a policy is not only measured on how it looks on paper. Okay. It is measured from the time of conceiving it to the time of implementation and evaluation. Now, and that is the problem we have. The problem we have is that, you see, program-based budget is the new, better way of budgeting, because it has a better way of auditing, evaluation, and monitoring of the performance. Unfortunately, the people who are going to do the monitoring, who are going to do these things, were not taken through on how to monitor the program-based budgeting system. Okay. That's the problem. I think the best thing would have been first take these people through to understand. Even the people who did the budget committee, members of parliament, I was with one of them and we were having a conversation. They do not understand it. They don't understand it. So how will they sensitize the public? So in other words, we have now pushed the budget. We are pushing the budget, the budgeting things far away from the ordinary people whose life is supposed actually to be impacted by this budget. Okay. It is not understood by the by the members. It is only understood by my brother Ramadhan Govi and his people at Ministry of Finance. And yet for them, they are simply supposed to be overseers. So I will tell you that this budget we seem to be going to be a loss. It is going to be one of the biggest losses. I was asking, especially those people in Ministry of Finance, that you see, of course, the other one is a big failure, the one we are ending. Now, this time you come and say, we have a budget of 52 trillion. And last time you gave URA to collect 25, they only collected 17. This time you are telling them to collect up to a tune of 29? 29? Now, meaning that an increment of 16%
of what they were supposed to achieve.
Yes. Now, now you're telling us that the economy grew at about 6.2. That's what the number tells us, 6.2. An economy that grows at 6.2, but you are slapping on it an increment of collection of 16%
in the next financial year.
I mean, what kind of economics is that? That you see, we are driving at a speed of 6.2 per hour, but you want the achievement in terms of consumption of fuel to be at 16%. That is poor economics, and it is only to fail the performance of the economy and the understanding of how the budget should go. Because URA is not going to achieve that, obviously. Two, many businesses are going to be squeezed. Worst of all, you know that now government is focusing on domestic borrowing. That also means that government has gone back to borrow, to do a hunt for money in the same ground with you. And you know, reasonably, every money lender would want to lend government, not an individual, because government, you are assured, first of all,
it's going to return the money.
It's going to return your money after all with the good interest. So that means you're making business environment hostile. You're making the money for investment very difficult to get.
To access,
But also, and yet there's an increment of taxation. And yet there are areas where you do, and yet you are also narrowing the tax base by increasing the kind of people you're giving tax holidays, increasing the kind of people who you're giving tax waivers. You know, man. So that is the difficulty we are now faced with.
Okay, and now as we're summing up with our conversations here, how do you think we should prepare ourselves for the next financial year budget? We have only 29 trillion Ugandan shillings. That is in our resource envelope. That is what Uganda Revenue Authority has to collect in the next financial year. And projected, yes. Exactly. So we don't know whether it will make it exceed.
Of course, it has failed. It has failed in many, so you cannot.
You can't be so much.
You can't be sure.
Okay, and when you look at the issue to do with passing of the LGBTQ, that is the anti-homosexuality law, there are some donors that are cutting funding of Uganda. The president said we have other alternatives. We can't stick to other countries that want to push their cultures onto us. But also, you look at the situation that the budget, however much we are saying we are cutting expenditures, we have to borrow more to fund it as well. Where do you see this national budget, and how do you see us going through the next financial year?
Of course, number one, I have already told you, I've told you that I see very gloomy situation.
Okay.
It looks like the situation is only going to be worse. By the way, I needed to have mentioned that out of the 52 trillion, the only amount of money which is there actual for development, for productive development program, is less than 2.5 trillion. All the rest of the money is either salary, servicing debt, and so on and so forth. But you see, I think it is only, like we mentioned here, it is only about prioritization. You see, let me tell you where we would get the money, and even because we should all stand and reject the arrogance of people imposing on us their culture. We should stand strong and reject, because people who cannot, those same people in their own country, they are still struggling with some states in the US accepting homosexuality. And in some states in US, if you are homosexual, they even put you to death. Now, how can they? They can't have that conversation with the Arabs. They can't have that conversation with China, with the Asians. Why do they have that conversation with us? Now, it is because of our own failure to finance our, and yet there. Let me tell you, do you know, in the last in 2020 financial year, the records, that's the records I have from export.com. Domestically here, we do not have records from gold revenue, gold. And yet from the export.com, our revenue from the gold, it is about 6.8 trillion. Now, in our income budget here, it is not reflected. That means that money is somebody's pocket money somewhere. It is not anywhere. Now, just imagine where you get close to 7 trillion and you add it to this budget. That's area number one. Area number two, these people will give tax revenue and tax holidays. The data available in Uganda is that all the investors we give tax holidays, our tax holiday is close to 9 trillion every financial year. Now, just add that 9 trillion to this, close to this 7 trillion. To your national budget. That's close to 16 trillion. You know that corruption takes, according to Honorable Kamya, up to around 11 trillion. Now, if we are only frugal with our resource envelope, I am telling you, we shall not have a shortage, we shall not go into borrowing. I mean, even if we went into borrowing, it will be very minimal. So, the only thing we have to do, if we want this budget to perform, number one, we should fight corruption to zero level. That 11 trillion must be saved. If it is saved, number two, the issue of tax holiday, because tax holiday and waivers that you can't give to Ugandans, you can't give it to people who are coming. And you see, the statistical data or data available is that those people we give up to about 9 trillion tax waiver. Once their time expires, those companies are either renamed and registered so that they apply for new, or they collapse and go away with it. So, in other words, we have no benefit out of it. Three, the issue of natural resources. This is 6-point-something trillion from the gold and so on. Four, simply empower regional business. Let me tell you, in Teso, where we used to, you see the economy of Teso used to be farming and then cattle keeping. Because the cattle keeping, we understand, we can begin debating what happened to it. Now, of course, the cassava also, we can debate what happened to it. They have blame here and so on. But they went and told them, you plant oranges, and then we even make for you a factory that squeezes juice called Teju. Now, when they made that factory, I am telling you, these people started producing oranges. When oranges were, at the time they are supposed to supply the factory, they took the oranges to the factory, they told them those oranges are hard, these machines of here cannot squeeze them, and then people, you see, you get it? Yeah. So you have destroyed the productivity of the people. You told them to plant oranges. After planting oranges, the machines can't squeeze them. Now, oranges now being squeezed in Teso are now bought in from Kenya. Okay. Kenya. Go to Kigezi here down. Kigezi, do you know that if you only said all the chips we eat in Kampala hotels are got from Kigezi. Do you know how much empowerment you will have given the people of Kigezi? Now, you empower them because then you want them to come to capacity to a level where they can pay taxes to finance the budget.
Okay.
Why do we get mangoes? Why do we get Irish potatoes? Why do we get oranges from South Africa if we can get them from here and empower our farmers to be economically viable for tax, to increase our tax base?
Okay. Well, of course, those are big conversations that continue to pose debate among us. Many of the Ugandans have been having Daka Asman, who is the Secretary General at the National Economic Empowerment Dialogue that is Need Uganda. Of course, we are discussing and digesting more of the national budget for the next financial year, 2023-2024. It is 52.7 trillion of a budget that we do expect to be presented on the 14th of June by the Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development. That and more is what we've been having here on the show today. Coming up after this will be Financial Markets with Anthony Sebali, who will be giving you more details of the financial markets performance in the country and East Africa. Many thanks for being part of the show this morning. Have a good day. Goodbye.